So, if we wanted to look at this in terms of its linear temporal relationship to our current now, we're looking at something that's going to be popping off in a reasonably big way in terms of a change of momentum in just a few days, maybe around the 27th or 28th, but ahead of September. However, all of September and into early October is showing a very definite uptick in emotional values, both building tension and release tension. Now, this actually is sort of a description of humanity as going through like a mental process over the course of these next, let's just say, 6 weeks, over these next 6 weeks and a few days, right? Because it starts a few days earlier. But it's primarily really takes off in September, almost on the first or second. And then it just goes roaring all the way through in terms of the levels of building and then subsequent release language. And the release language appears to be eroding some of the built-up tension in the general discourse language. That is to say that we appear to be into a release period in which we're going to be releasing more built-up tension. So we're going to have release values that will take away from the building tension values that are already inherent in the social order. Now, this can be good and it can be bad. You can have a release period where you release a lot, and at the end of it, you just go, oh, whew, I'm glad that's out. Right? I'm glad we're done with that. This is going to go on for a long time, though. So to a certain extent, I expect that this aspect of the release will be stressful for a lot of people. So just because there's a lot of release language out there does not mean that you're necessarily going to have an emotional release as a reaction to it. You may have a building tension to the reaction to it, just because of who is releasing language about what, all right? So it's going to be a difficult period for all of us. It'll be very intense emotionally. It's going to start off on, like I say, the 27th or the 28th of August. It'll run all the way through September, and then the data sets that I've processed so far go out to about October 14, 15, and continue with the trend, albeit in a somewhat reduced level of release relative to the amount of building tension coming in. So basically, I'm always trying to report the changes in the balance of release and building tension values. I apologize for the dog noises in the background. We've got a major war going on here, so between the dogs. Anyway, so it's like this in the winter. Everybody gets bottled up because of the storms, and this is an early storm for the time of the year. We don't usually get these kind in August. Anyway, so we're going to go into a period here in September, as I say, starting almost on the 1st, but likely we'll see it on the 2nd or the 3rd, of release language that's going to pick up relative to a number of subjects here. And we can think of September as being some kind of a transition month, right? September and early October. Maybe it continues all the way through October. I haven't got the processing done. I will kick it off and start that processing while I'm out there moving the machinery and the furniture from the office out there into here, but I'm not even going to look at that data for a couple of days. It's just going to sit there and percolate as I do the rest of this work. Because, as I said, I have some video subjects I need to get done as well. Anyways, the transition aspect of September should become apparent to us by about mid-September or so. We should be able to really understand that the level of the release language is actually showing us a major shift, a major transition, exposing it. It's already really occurred, but it's going to be exposed to the extent that it will be discussed. So it wouldn't be out of line to imagine that sometime in mid-September or so, even the mainstream media would start realizing or talking about and recognizing the major shifts that have happened. Not just that, so many voters are going over to Trump, but rather they might even start talking about the Great Awakening and the details of it, right? All the evils of the Elohim worship cult and all of this kind of thing, right? Much more so than simply alluding to it. And they may even at that point discuss it in relation to the darlings of the mainstream media, the whole celebrity class, and so on, and all the symbolism and this kind of thing, right? At some point, we're going to get to that level of discussion, where it will be an open discussion even on mainstream, and we'll get to the point where it's so much of that kind of discussion that it actually bores everybody and bores the normies even, right? Although they'll be fascinated in the early days of it. And the data sets would suggest that maybe this September is going to be the very early days of the cracking of the egg, of the release of the psoas, right? So most people don't understand as you age, you really get a new relationship with your psoa muscles. This is PSOA. These are some of the most key muscles in your body. They connect your torso, your upper body from the hips up, down into the lower body, the legs. And these muscles are responsible for the how you carry your spine, okay? And if you have too much tension in these, you get the hunchback approach of old age, right? If you have too little tension in the muscles in the appropriate ways, insofar as it is for males, you get a sort of a sway back and a bulging abdomen kind of an effect. And you can correct these things. It's relatively easily done. I'll take a moment to get into it when I get done with the data discussion here. But in any event, so this is going to be like the psoa muscles of humanity are going to get released. And when that happens, when you've got too much tension in the wrong psoa muscles and you held it for a long time and someone comes along and shows you how to release, it is a marvelous thing indeed, right? And even in young people, they get their too much tension, the cortisol affects the psoa muscles because of the proximate location. They're going to get more of the cortisol influence than muscles in the extremities. So they'll hold and maintain strain longer and will drain you longer. And that's really what's been going on, is this strain of holding this illusion that was put on us by all this extra energy being pumped into our humanity psoa muscles by the mainstream media, by the Elohim worship cult. We've had to maintain this illusion, this non-fact-based paradigm, to the detriment of the social order, because we have to put all this energy into the delusion of it all, right? Now we're going to get some of that energy back, because we're going to go through a month, at least a month, maybe 2 or 3. And it's a long-term process. I mean, we're going to start this initial release. The psoas will sag from the lumbar 1 through 5. The side attachments of the lumbars to the vertebrae and the discs between them will start to readjust, and we'll be able to hold our spines in an appropriate manner as we are able to redistribute energy around these areas or through these areas that used to be obscured by, where the energy flow was obscured by all these knots and tension and cortisol damage, right? Stress damage. And so we'll have we'll be able to stand upright without pain, that kind of a deal. But it's going to take us a while, because we've held this tension for a long time. I know for a fact that my life has been lived within this illusion, that the delusion was put on us before I was born. So like in the late 40s, they really moved this in. And of course, it all has to do with obscuring the UFOs and the extraterrestrials, right? Not demons, not angels, they're extraterrestrials. And they don't live in other dimensions. They simply use other methods of communicating that have tricked some humans into understanding that form of communication as being extra-dimensional when it's not really. Anyway, in September, we're going to get this multifaceted and very diverse level of focus for our release. So we'll get a lot of language about politics, tons of language about that, but we'll also get all kinds of release language here about academia, about colleges, and it may participate in a lot of colleges not being able to survive, right? There's stuff coming up relative to colleges and universities that is going to be existential in terms of will they be able to make it, and that stuff coming up begins this year, and it may indeed even begin on the 27th or 28th. Maybe that's a day where they report, oh, geez, our enrollment's down 45%, or, our funding is now at risk because of the lack of students, because we get, not only do they get money from the student, which they take out debt in order to pay these colleges, but the colleges also get a stipend per student for brainwashing them for the Department of Education and the federal government. So they get all these kind of grants and shit that are basically, or that are based on the number of minds they're going to be able to pollute. And that's breaking down now, especially as the banks are going to come into some real problems here, and we'll see all sorts of funding issues. So what happens to a student if they take out a loan to go to some college, and the bank and bear in mind, the federal government doesn't give out these loans. They're bank loans that are then backed by the government, right? And they've just had the forgiveness of student loans, so those people have to start paying again and all of this. But what happens if the banks start collapsing around or ahead of the ability to shift money over to the college in some student's name? In other words, you take out a bank loan, but before you can actually get into college, the bank goes bust. And we're going to see a flurry of that. I think we're now up to like 140 banks in China that have collapsed, and the last 20 or 30 went very, very rapidly. Like, it was unseen that it wasn't forecast that these particular banks were going to go down. Anyway, we're at that stage now here in the U.S., and so that will impact things. Colleges and universities are going to be struggling as a result of this, and that's going to impact a lot of other stuff as well, because of the flow through from the colleges into things like hospitals, big pharma research, government research even. So the data sets right now are suggesting that September marks a very good series of temporal markers that will be indicative of sliding into this new period, into this transition period. It's going to be part of the transition into sci-fi world, but in order to get in there, we've got to expose and shed all of this baggage. We've got to release the tension in the psoas such that we can align our spine in a correct way in order to be able to climb our way into sci-fi world. Bear in mind, if you're a swayback or a hunchback, you're not going to be able to do well walking uphill, right? So you're going to struggle. So the thing you need to do is to get your psoas at a personal level, but we're also doing it at a humanity level, and are going to get all this stuff sorted out. Now, this is going to be somewhat painful because it is a mental, physical process of rebuilding. We're going to have to rebuild specific tension and specific muscles in the appropriate way in order that we can keep our civilization upright and moving forward. So not going to be easy. Lots and lots of angry discourse and actions around that. It will take us some time to sort through a lot of this. The best advice I've got for September is to observe, but don't involve. So in other words, observe what's going on, but don't get your emotions all twisted up into it. because we've got so long to go. We've got so much else to do. And so if you so you need to have that level of detachment in order to get through it without being sucked in and flushed down the drain with a lot of the changes that we're going to encounter. The changes are showing up in finance. They're showing up in even on the internet stuff, right? So it wouldn't surprise me that we have internet outages and cyber attacks in a big way. All kinds of data sets for disruption causing release language in wide areas of humanity. So we'll see this in Northern Europe, we'll see this in the UK, we'll see it in Canada, we'll see it to a lesser extent in Asia, but certainly in North America and Central America and South America and Africa. There's going to be all kinds of release relative to the delusion that has been put on us. So now this is also going to be a lot of come to reality meetings between various groups that will then be openly discussing their common areas of interest and their common enemies. And so this is going to be just ever so exciting a time for all parties involved as this stuff comes out. I'm expecting that in this month we will see a greater level of release of language, of secrets revealed kind of thing relative to UFOs and UAPs. I've got a number of sets that are going to this 0-point energy thing, right? And new language about that, like from new sources. And also the language set about, in the United States, about what's described as it's described as major and also fundamental. So I'm presuming way down at a deep level. Whistleblower guy comes and gets a lot of press, gets a lot of visibility, and is part of this transition of this month of September. This is the data sets appear to say that this guy is a new personality, reluctant to come out, has credentials up the yin-yang, and that means everybody should pay attention to him. It's not like, Captain Mark Richards, a guy who's lifer in jail pretending to be a spaceonaut, right? It's not like that. It's going to be somebody with real credentials. I don't know that they're military, but there's a lot of language about the military around them. Anyway, so they're going to boost us off on UFO, UAP talk, and then there's also a lot of data sets showing that UFOs and UAPs are going to continue their shows for us. We're going to see a lot more of these multi-object interactions that don't make any sense to us, but that will be observed by lots of people. And we'll also have more of the claims by individuals that there were landings that occurred in their local area. Some will claim to have had interactions. None of the data sets really show that this is... So the data sets would show that particular subset relative to the claimed interactions, and it does have the word claimed, so it's not just saying interactions, but the claimed interactions does show some level of fact, possibility that it's factual, but in the main, it's a lot of posers, right? And so that's going to be part of our problem, is the obscuring and all of this sort of thing. I think that's really about it. I didn't want to go much longer, and I got to start hauling stuff, but I wanted you to understand that this transition period is getting close to us, 3 or 4 days away. I don't know what we're going to see on the 27th or whatever, but it starts off at a fairly exciting level. The building tension has ramped up through the latter half of August, and then we start these release spikes where it'll jump up and then drop down, and it drops down a little bit more than the total amount of the rise, such that it starts slowly whittling away some of the built-up tension language. You're going to see a lot about history, by the way. We're going to really get into it this month. Even in MSN, they're going to have some kind of a speed bump, a road bump in their paradigm, in their propaganda that runs smack into history, and they're going to have a real problem. So I don't know what that's going to be. I haven't gotten into the data sets to get too much more detail, and it's unlikely it'll occur until maybe sometime next week or something like that. Anyway, talk to you guys later.